But to choose a candidate with much more experience than creativity potential is those companies associated with, um, for example, problem solving skills, that is critical. For example, companies of finance, banking, they do not need a lot of this creativity. They do not need to be innovating all the time. Rather, they need people with experience. They need people that know what they're doing into analyzing data, all of this other skills that are very important for these type of situations and industries. So this would be their main focus instead of someone that's creative that could focus much more on the marketing team. Um, Also, companies that execution is more important than the idea. So in roles where implementing creative ideas matter more than generating them. So they know more about how to implement things instead of how to create things, the things that they already know. So so practice creativity is crucial. And finally, where the organization has a structured creative processes. So structures, so companies that may benefit more from someone who can work within those systems than purely like a creative thinker, is what these companies would favor much more. Therefore, the choice would be based more on what the industry type and what the company needs. For example, if it's practice creativity, this would be applied much more for immediate application and structured innovation rather than potential creativity. It fits on future focused roles, on future innovations and needed for starting a company or for developing a company or for the growth of a company. So for the question, under what organizational circumstances would you choose a job candidate who exhibited creative potential but lacked practice creativity experience over a candidate who had worked in an environment where opportunities to develop practice creativity were extensive but who exhibited less creative potential? So for the case of a candidate with a high creative potential but little experience may be preferable in situations such as businesses that are just starting, so like startups, entrepreneurs, where they need these creative potential ideas, where the creativity is and innovation is what should be like the biggest skill of this person, because in a startup they're looking for innovation to prioritize this. Since they're just starting, they need to know what could reach the market the most. So if this is preferable than past experiences that would not be as useful in creating something. Also, those companies that their main goal is growth. So, for example, if they want all the time to be innovating, to be in the market, to be to be updated and have a high position in the market, they do need someone who would help them grow each time. And to grow, there needs to be innovation, there needs to be creativity, because with this, then it's really hard to go somewhere with the lack of this. So it allows time for development. This talent and can lead to greater long-term returns. And also in industries where the shift is very adaptable. So for example, if there's a lot of shift changes, then for example in technology and digital marketing, they do need a lot of creativity, especially in the marketing field. And they do value more the creativity than past experience. And is it possible to be creative without innovating? So the answer is yes. So we can be creative without any innovation or without creating any innovations, because a person can generate new ideas, a new work, new piece of art without necessarily innovating something. So they can create concepts without necessarily applying them in the ways of like creating change or creating an innovation per se. So, for example, if an artist creates a piece of work, so like an abstract shape or painting on a canvas, this is not necessarily considered a groundbreaking technique for the industry, so it is not considered an innovation. However, you do need creativity and talent to create this artwork, but it is not considered an innovation. So this would be an example of being creative without the need of innovating. So the question, is it possible to innovate without creativity? So while creativity helps and fuels innovation, it is possible to innovate without being incredibly creative, because some innovations, although they are fueled by this creativity, they combine existing products or existing ideas, and rather than inventing something from zero, from scratch. So, for example, Henry Ford, he didn't create automobiles, but he innovated in the assembly of creating, well, the cars that we know, Fords, in that time. So it is not necessarily to be like completely creative to innovate, but it does help a lot in the process. So for the question, discuss the relationship between creativity and innovation. Is it important to innovate without creativity? Is it possible to be creative without innovating? Defend your position. So, first of all, the relationship between creativity and innovation is that they're closely related, but they're distinct concepts. Because creativity is the process of generating new ideas, of creating original ideas, while innovating is creating some ideas based on that creativity. So it's applying those ideas that I already have and those concepts to create a value, to create a process, a product, or solutions to a product or to a process. So the industries or occupation where satisficing would not be an appropriate strategy for decision making would be, first of all, in anything in the medical field. Well, the medical field, they do have to deeply observe every single detail. They can't just make decisions from thinking what would be the most acceptable rather than most optimal when it comes to someone's life or a patient. The decision has to be based on what's the best for the patient, what's the most optimal, not what it's like the most acceptable. So they do have to strive for the best diagnosis, the best treatment, because if they give a patient something that they do not need, then this can cost the patient's life. Another business or industry that would not be appropriate to take with satisfying decisions would be those with anything associated with pilots, with aircrafts, engineering, aerospatial, because these are also safety concerns. So any business that has any safety concern, this would be one, because for example, pilots have to take every time they take a flight, they do have to go over every single step, and they cannot miss one, because this can also cost people's lives. So it is important to take what's the most optimal decisions in a case. For example, if there's an emergency, they do have a protocol to follow. So they do have to follow step by step instead of just going what's most acceptable, that can cost people's life. And finally, lawyers as well, for example, because they do have to first analyze a case. They do have to look at every law associated with the case. They do have to know everything that would be involved in the case. They can't take a decision because it's acceptable, because for example, for a judge or for the case, it wouldn't be acceptable. So it has to be the most optimal to their client, and also according to the laws, according to the state they're in, their country they're in. they do have to take into account like all of this type of decisions, and they do have to go thoroughly through cases, contracts, regulations to ensure that justice is served, and also have to prevent any cost of any legal errors. If they do have a legal error, this is very costly. And a good enough or an acceptable approach could lead to wrongful convictions. Even their client can go to jail, and other mistakes then can be horrible. Or even ethical violations. So these are just examples of industries that do have to take other decision-making practices rather than this satisficing decision approach. So for the question, define the perspective that the first step in the 5-step decision-making model is the most important. The first step is defining the problem. This is the most important step because without knowing what the problem is, then it would be practically impossible to know what solution to arise or what alternatives to give to the problem. So it is very important to set a foundation for the entire process, to know how to arrive to a solution without any misguided or wasted resources, ineffective decisions. So the others, such as identifying and weight decision criteria, generating multiple alternatives, rate alternatives on the basis of decision criteria, and choose, implement, and evaluate the best alternative. They're all very important, but we need those steps with the foundation of knowing what the problem is. And without knowing this first step, we wouldn't be able to move forward and develop a solution. By clearly understanding the issue, decision makers can take a decision which would be much more appropriate. It would generate an appropriate alternatives. It would also evaluate solutions effectively, and they would focus on relevant data rather than going on over things that are not even necessary to solve the or to arrive to a solution or a conclusion and make a decision. So without a well-identified problem, even the best decision makers will not be able to solve the problem to address the real life issue, and it can lead to potential or suboptimal outcomes. And it would with this step, we would ensure that all these issues are taken into account and all the solutions are appropriate for the decision that we must take. So for the question, in what types of work situations would satisficing be appropriate? List at least 3 occupations or industries where satisficing would not be an appropriate strategy for decision making. So first, satisficing decisions are those that aims for acceptable results rather than those optimal solutions. So they work well in situations where things such as time, resources, information are limited, and the solution is it's not a really important decision to make. It's just like a simply daily decision making process. So for example, such as going to a grocery shop and buying gum, for example. For gum, we don't have to make such decisions that are like optimal, like researching where the gum comes from. We simply choose it based on the packaging or the flavor. So this would be an example of satisficing decisions. So for example, the work situations that would be appropriate using satisficing decisions would be, for example, those of fast fashion or retail shops, retail management, because they would have to choose, for example, fashion based on what is good, what is trendy, and what's good enough in order that for like the season, for the time, and rather than spending a lot of time on like forecasting what would the demand be, or like deeply analyzing the market. This would be simply a decision of what's trendy at the time, what kind of season are we all these type of decisions would be satisficing decisions. Another work situation where satisficing would be appropriate is customer service, because once you're attending a customer, you don't have a lot of time to focus on precision, focus on perfection. You just have to meet the customer demands and needs. Therefore, it would be rather quick decisions, rather the suitable for the customer, rather than focusing on other type of concerns with the decision. Another type would be administrative roles, so anything in this situation where managers have to take decisions such as scheduling meetings or tiny or minor expenses. These would be more of satisfying decisions, because they wouldn't have to go into perfection, into going what is needed from the company or stuff like that. They would just need to know, like, over their head, or taking a decision based on their time over what they think it's appropriate for the company, rather than going deeply and studying the whole company to make one small decision.